Imagine waking up one morning in the year 2025, turning on the news and seeing a breaking story on every channel. All flights grounded worldwide. No planes are flying, and they won't be coming back. At first, people might assume it's some sort of temporary issue, maybe a glitch or an international emergency, but as the hours pass, it becomes clear this is permanent. Every airport, runway, and and control tower around the globe is suddenly useless. The skies are silent. No takeoffs, no landings. For the first time in over 100 years, the air above us is empty. This would feel like something straight out of a movie. Over 100,000 commercial flights operate every single day, moving everything from passengers to fresh seafood to urgent medical supplies. Planes connect people across continents in just a few hours. Without them, the world would suddenly feel much larger and more isolated. Families separated by oceans would be cut off, unable to visit one another without long and difficult alternatives. Business trips would be canceled, honeymoons and vacations would vanish overnight. Some people would wake up in countries they had only planned to visit for a weekend, now stuck indefinitely. Airports, once buzzing with life, would fall quiet. Inside terminals, chaos would begin as travelers realized there's no way out. Tens of thousands of people would be stranded in cities far from home. Flight boards would be frozen in place, showing delays and cancellations for every single destination. Taxi lines would overflow, hotel lobbies would crowd up fast, and people would scramble to book trains or buses, anything to keep moving. But for many, especially those on islands or in countries without connected rail systems, there'd be no real option left. And then comes the confusion. Airline workers wouldn't know what to tell passengers. Pilots and flight crews would be grounded without warning, and air traffic controllers would suddenly be out of a job. There would be no official playbook for something like this. This level of shutdown has never happened, not even during global events like September 11th or the early days of the COVID pandemic. This would be the first time in modern history that all flight just stopped and never resumed. The air would be strangely quiet too. No distant hum of jets overhead, no contrails streaking the sky. For people living near busy airports, it might even feel eerie at first. A kind of silence the world has never really known. But behind that quiet comes tension. People would be glued to their phones and TVs, waiting for some kind of update, an announcement, anything to explain how this happened, but none would come. Planes are simply done flying forever, and this is just the beginning. The real trouble starts when the effects begin to ripple out into every corner of everyday life, not just for travelers, but for industries, governments, and the global economy. The first few hours would bring confusion and panic, but the next few days would bring much more than that. After the initial shock wears off, the deeper consequences of a world without air travel begin to show. One of the first areas to feel the strain would be cargo and freight. While many people think of planes mainly in terms of passengers, a huge portion of global goods move through the skies every day. High-value items like electronics, pharmaceuticals, and medical equipment are often shipped by air because it's fast and secure. Without flights, these supply chains would break instantly. In just a few days, hospitals in remote areas would run low on specialized medicine that is usually flown in. Certain organ transplants, which rely on fast delivery by air, would no longer be possible. Temperature-sensitive goods like insulin, vaccines, or blood plasma would be nearly impossible to transport across countries in time. Cold storage trucking can only cover so much ground, and not every region has the infrastructure for long-distance road shipping. The tech industry would also be hit hard. Many companies move critical parts for phones, computers, and servers by air. When those shipments stop, production lines start to slow down or even shut off completely. Factories that depend on just-in-time delivery methods would not have enough storage or backup supplies to keep running for long. This would lead to shortages on the store shelves and delays in shipping new devices across the world. Postal systems would grind to a crawl. International mail would have to travel by sea, which takes weeks instead of hours. Things like overnight documents, time-sensitive legal papers, or international business contracts could no longer be delivered on time. E-commerce would feel the pressure too. Global online retailers often use air freight to move products quickly between warehouses and customers. But without that option, delivery times would stretch out dramatically, from 2 days to 2 weeks or more. Then there's the issue of perishables. Many countries rely on imported fresh food that is flown in daily. Exotic fruits, fresh fish, specialty meats, and even flowers would disappear from markets. Grocery stores in landlocked nations or those with poor road and rail systems would be forced to switch to only local food. Prices would go up fast, and selection would shrink even faster. For places like small islands that import most of their fresh produce by air, this could lead to food insecurity in a matter of weeks. The ripple effects don't stop at just goods and services. Insurance companies would suddenly face massive claims from canceled cargo shipments and stalled contracts. Legal disputes over delivery guarantees would clog court systems. Even museums and art galleries would be affected, since they often rely on air transport for moving exhibits and priceless works of art. That entire system would be shut down. Meanwhile, ports and railway systems would be pushed to their limits. As demand shifts to sea and land freight, there would be huge backlogs at shipping yards. Trains and trucks could not handle a sudden overload, especially in countries where infrastructure is already stretched thin. Delays would stack up fast, and smaller businesses would be the first to feel the hit. And all of this would only be in the first couple of weeks. The world would still be trying to figure out what long-term life looks like without flight, and not everyone would be able to adapt. By the time a month has passed, the effects of a world with no air travel would begin to reshape everyday life in ways most people never expected. One of the biggest changes would be in how people view distance. What used to be a simple 4-hour flight now becomes a multi-day journey by car, bus, or train, if that route even exists. Long-distance relationships would suffer. International families would be cut off, not by borders, but by the sheer difficulty of getting from one place to another. Even a visit between neighboring countries could become a major undertaking. The travel industry as a whole would be in shambles. Airlines would be permanently shut down. Entire fleets of planes would sit rusting in unused airports. Thousands of pilots, flight attendants, and ground crews would be out of work with no jobs to return to. The tourism industry would be decimated. Places that once relied on travelers, from Paris to Bali to New York City, would see hotels shut down, local businesses close, and unemployment skyrocket. Cruise lines and train operators would try to fill the gap, but they could never match the global reach or speed of air travel. In the academic world, international student exchange programs would disappear. Universities that relied on students flying in from overseas would face budget cuts and shrinking enrollment. Global conferences, once held in big cities and attended by experts from all over the world, would have to move online permanently or be limited to local participants. Scientific collaboration would slow down, with researchers no longer able to attend labs or events outside their region. Sports would also take a major hit. International competitions, like the Olympics or the World Cup, would be nearly impossible to organize. Teams could not fly to play in different countries, and fans could not travel to see them. Even national leagues that spanned across large countries, like in the United States, Russia, or Brazil, would struggle to maintain schedules. Entire seasons might be canceled or severely reduced to only local matchups. Diplomacy would look different too. Government leaders and diplomats would no longer be able to hop on a plane for emergency meetings or peace talks. Embassies might become more important again, with foreign affairs managed more slowly through written communication and digital calls. Political tension could grow as misunderstandings drag on and in-person meetings become rare. Countries that once relied on fast air travel to respond to disasters or humanitarian crises would be forced to rethink how they provide aid or manage emergencies abroad. Even the way we experience global culture would shift. People would not be able to visit different countries and see the world for themselves. Travel documentaries and social media influencers who built careers around visiting far-off places would become a thing of the past. Without the ability to travel quickly, people would grow up never leaving their region, and global culture might begin to fracture. The sense of shared international identity could weaken, with communities becoming more focused on local or national concerns. The skies, once filled with movement and noise, would remain permanently empty. And while some would enjoy the peace and the cleaner air, the world as a whole would feel smaller, slower, and more isolated than ever before. A world without flight would no longer be the connected place we once knew, and that realization would just be sinking in as people try to move forward. As the years go by in a world without planes, the long-term changes would start to settle in. One of the biggest shifts would be in how countries and businesses redesign their transportation systems. Governments would invest heavily in high-speed rail, long-distance highways, and shipping routes. Trains that cross continents would become the new norm, with efforts to connect major cities through land rather than air. Ferries and cargo ships would increase in use even for passenger travel, though much slower than flying ever was. Logistics companies would have to rework how goods are moved. In the past, a shipment from Japan to the United Kingdom might have taken just 2 days by air. Now it could take over a month by sea and land. This would force companies to store more inventory in advance and rely less on quick turnarounds. Food chains that once served fresh produce flown in from tropical countries would now rely only on what can be grown locally or shipped without spoiling. Supermarkets would look different, and menus at restaurants would lose many items people used to take for granted. The tech world would also evolve. With international travel off the table, companies would focus more on improving virtual communication. Remote work and virtual meetings would become permanent fixtures. Technologies like virtual reality and holograms could see a surge in development, aiming to make people feel more present during digital meetings and events. Students and professionals might attend lectures, workshops, or conferences through immersive digital platforms rather than boarding a plane. Airports would be left behind like relics of a faster past. Once busy terminals would be abandoned or turned into other facilities, maybe shopping centers, housing developments, or museums. The iconic sound of jet engines would vanish from daily life. Kids growing up in this new world might never hear a plane overhead or understand what it was like to fly across the ocean in a single day. Entire generations would be raised without ever stepping foot in an airplane. Climate change would become a central topic in this new chapter. With aviation gone, global carbon emissions would see a noticeable drop, especially in the first few years. Environmental groups would push for more reductions in other areas, arguing that if the world could give up planes, maybe it could give up other polluting habits too. On the other hand, industries forced to rely on slower, dirtier cargo ships and longer truck routes might cancel out some of those gains. It would spark debate over what the world truly gained or lost by letting go of flight. In time, humanity would adapt. People would find new ways to connect, trade, and move across the planet, just as they had before airplanes were invented. But the global mindset would be different. The sense that the world was once only hours away from anywhere to anywhere would fade. A flightless world would be one that feels more spread out, slower, and maybe even more fragile. And while some would see this new world as simpler or more grounded, others would always look up at the sky and wonder what was lost.